Every April, roughly 150 million Americans sit down to do something that citizens in Denmark, Sweden, Spain, and the United Kingdom almost never have to do. They have to figure out their own taxes from scratch. The government already knows how much you earned, how much your employer withheld, how much your bank paid you in interest. It has all the numbers. But instead of sending you a pre-filled return you can approve with a click, as 28 wealthy nations already do, the United States makes you buy software to organize the information the government already has and then send it back. The company that sells that software to 60% of the market has spent more than $47 million over 2 decades making sure it stays that way. TurboTax didn't just build a better product, it built a system where the problem it solves can never go away, because every time the government tries to make taxes easier, the company that profits from the difficulty spends millions to stop it. That loop, running continuously since 1998, is the single mechanism that turned a piece of tax software into a $4.4 billion a year consumer business inside a $16 billion company. And the pattern is so simple, it almost sounds made up. Lobby to keep taxes hard, then charge people to make them easy. Here is where the loop starts. In 1984, a programmer named Michael Chipman built a piece of tax preparation software called TurboTax. A decade later, Intuit bought it. By the mid-90s, electronic filing was clearly the future. The IRS wanted to move tens of millions of paper returns online. And right around that time, both the Clinton administration and then the George W. Bush administration floated the same obvious idea. If the IRS already has your W-2 and your 1099, why not let the government fill out a return for you and let you approve it? The way Denmark had been doing since the late 80s, the way nearly 3/4 of wealthy nations would eventually adopt. For Intuit, this was an existential threat. If the government built a free system that handled basic returns, the kind that roughly 70% of American filers submit, TurboTax's largest customer segment would vanish overnight. So in 1998, Intuit hired Bernie McKay, a former Carter administration aide and senior lobbyist from AT&T, as its vice president for corporate affairs. His job was not to improve the product. His job was to stop the government from making the product unnecessary, and he succeeded almost immediately. That same year, Congress passed the IRS Restructuring and Reform Act. Buried inside it, reflecting Intuit's lobbying, was language directing the IRS to cooperate with and encourage the private sector to increase electronic filing, not build its own system. That single sentence became the legal foundation for everything that followed. 4 years later, when the Bush administration's Office of Management and Budget proposed a free, no-cost online filing option for taxpayers, the tax preparation industry struck a deal instead. On October 30th, 2002, the IRS signed an agreement with 17 software companies, a group led and largely organized by Intuit called the Free File Alliance. The terms were extraordinary. The companies would offer free filing to the bottom 70% of taxpayers, roughly 100 million people. In exchange, the IRS agreed not to build its own filing system. The industry gave up a product almost no one would actually use, and in return, it got the government to tie its own hands. And here's where the pattern reveals itself. On paper, 70% of Americans were eligible for free filing through the Free File Alliance. In practice, the companies made it nearly impossible to find. Intuit and others added code to their websites that hid free file pages from Google search results. They created a product called TurboTax Free Edition alongside TurboTax Free File, names so similar that millions of low-income filers who qualified for the genuinely free version ended up on the paid version instead, entering all their information before discovering they owed money. A 2019 investigation by ProPublica laid the scheme bare, and a Treasury Inspector General audit confirmed it. The process taxpayers had to follow was obscure and complex, and the IRS had done almost no advertising or oversight. The numbers tell the story: 70% eligibility, 3% usage. At its peak in 2005, only 5.1 million people filed through the Free File program out of nearly 100 million who qualified. By 2020, that number had dropped to roughly 2.5 million. The program existed just enough to keep the IRS from building its own tool, and not enough to actually help anyone. Meanwhile, Intuit's consumer tax revenue climbed year after year, reaching $4.4 billion in fiscal 2024. If you find this interesting, consider subscribing to the channel. We cover the kind of strategies most consumers never think about. Enjoy. The pattern did not stop at the Free File deal. Every time a new threat emerged, Intuit ran the same play. In 2007 and again in 2011, the company lobbied on bills that would have explicitly barred the Treasury Department from offering return-free filing. In California, when the state launched a pilot program called Ready Return in 2005, which sent taxpayers a pre-filled return they could simply approve, Intuit spent roughly $3 million over 5 years trying to kill it. The company lost that fight, but the program remained small and eventually folded into a state-level system called CalFile. At the federal level, the barricade held. Intuit's internal vocabulary tells you everything about the strategy. The company used the word encroachment, its catch-all term for any government initiative that made filing easier. Internal presentations outlined tactics for fighting encroachment. The company's own Form 10-K filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission in 2012 stated plainly that governmental encroachment at both the federal and state levels may present a continued competitive threat to our business for the foreseeable future. Most companies describe competitors as threats. Intuit described the government helping its own citizens as a threat. The spending escalated as the threats grew. From 2003 through 2024, the entire tax preparation industry poured more than $93 million into federal lobbying. Intuit alone accounted for over $47 million of that total. By 2022, the company was spending $3.5 million a year on lobbying, a record at the time, and had hired dozens of revolving door lobbyists who had previously held government positions, including multiple former members of Congress. Then in 2023, after the Inflation Reduction Act allocated $15 million for the IRS to explore building a free direct filing system, Intuit's lobbying hit a new record, $3.8 million in a single year, with more than 100 lobbyists deployed. And in 2020, when the Free File agreement was revised to remove the clause barring the IRS from building its own system, and companies were told they could no longer hide their free products from search results, Intuit simply quit the alliance entirely. So did H&R Block. Then came the real test. In 2024, the IRS launched a pilot program called Direct File, a free government-built tool that allowed taxpayers in 12 states to file directly with the agency. It was exactly the thing Intuit had spent 20 years preventing. Over 140,000 taxpayers filed through it. 90% rated their experience as excellent or above average. The IRS made it permanent and expanded it to 25 states for the 2025 filing season. User satisfaction hit 94%. Intuit's response was immediate and total. The company spent nearly $4 million lobbying in both 2023 and 2024 to kill Direct File. During the 2024 election cycle, Intuit and other commercial tax prep companies made large donations to Republican members of Congress who later called for ending the program. 29 House Republicans wrote to the incoming president asking him to shut down Direct File on day one. Those lawmakers had collectively received $1.8 million in campaign contributions from opponents of the free filing tool. Intuit donated $1 million to the Presidential Inaugural Committee. By April 2025, the administration announced it would eliminate Direct File entirely. Staff working on the program had been told to stop development weeks earlier. The company that spent a quarter-century fighting free filing had won again. So here is what the market lives with today. The average American spends 13 hours and $290 filing their taxes each year. The total compliance burden, the time and money Americans collectively pour into understanding and completing their tax returns, runs to $464 billion a year, 7.1 billion hours. That is equivalent to 3.8 million full-time workers doing nothing but tax paperwork. TurboTax controls 60% of the consumer tax software market, with a customer churn rate so low that only 34% of its users even consider switching. The company does not just sell convenience. It sells the only reasonable escape from a system that could be simple, but is not, because simplicity would destroy the business model. The deeper principle is not about taxes. It is about manufactured friction. TurboTax identified a single point of vulnerability. If the government made filing easy, the company would have no customers. Then it spent more than 2 decades and tens of millions of dollars ensuring that vulnerability never materialized. The product does not solve a problem that naturally exists. It solves a problem the company actively maintains. 28 wealthy countries send their citizens pre-filled returns. The IRS already has the data to do the same for roughly half of American filers. The only reason it does not is that the company selling you the workaround has made sure year after year, administration after administration, that the fix never arrives. Next time you open TurboTax and answer questions the government already knows the answers to, remember, you are not paying for software. You are paying for the absence of a system that most of the developed world already has. If you enjoyed this deep dive and would like to see more, comment your ideas down below.